Matty here with another episode of Steelers Touch and Under. On this episode, we're talking about my favorite to my least favorite draft picks in the Steelers 2025 NFL draft class. All right, and I say favorite to least favorite. It's not that the least favorite guy I hate, not at all. It's just that it's out of all the picks, it's the least favorite one, and I'll justify that. Now, you're probably, if you're watching this, I'm really happy you are. I know there's been a lot of draft talk, and there's like rankings, and there's grades, and you've heard everything from A's to B minuses. You've heard about the value that the Steelers got when you get a player like Caleb Johnson, who's a top 50 player, and you get him at 83. You get Will Howard, who's a top 100 player. You get him at 185. You get Jack Sawyer, where they got him at 124, I think it is, and where he was where he was sort of placed, like Daniel Jeremiah's 77th best player, for example. Most of the Steelers draft picks going into the 7th round were huge value. So, of course, they're going to get the high grades. Obviously, Derek Harmon has had a draft grade for him anywhere between the 2nd or 3rd best interior defensive lineman. I had him as the best fit for the Steelers, and to the 23rd best player in the draft, and they got him at 21. But if you look at the D lineman and where the D lineman went overall, the two guys ahead of him, getting him at 21 was still an absolute steal. So I don't want to jeopardize all of that in context. Obviously, the Steelers have signed an interesting DFA class as well, which we've covered on the channel. But I want to talk about my favorite player and why, and then we'll talk about my least favorite player and why.
So we'll pull up the draft class. My favorite player in this draft, and it's very hard not to say Derek Harmon, and I actually really like this as well. So he's definitely like my bloke there in Caleb Johnson. So I was really happy that the Steelers were able to draft him. The production that you saw out of him in college, huge for the Steelers. I also think with Caleb Johnson, he filled a need without you having to spend an expensive draft pick. He filled a need without having to spend a lot of money in free agency on a running back. And the running backs, after last year's, not getting a lot of respect there, running backs had a huge year and a huge impact on the NFL. It's definitely obviously why, the Philadelphia Eagles won with Saquon. You saw the impact across the league in terms of the top blokes. But for me, Caleb Johnson, and fitting with the Steelers, having that tough mentality, having that, he's played a lot of football, scored a lot of touchdowns, been super productive. He even had over 200 yards receiving and two touchdowns receiving, last year for Ira as well. People are like, I don't know about his hands, but that's not shabby from a guy who's more of the bell cow running back in the Big Ten, playing for a team like Iowa with super loaded boxes. I heard a stat or something where it was like, Iowa faced the most amount of stacked boxes in the college football last year. And so for me, you bring a guy like that in with the experience, and we know teams like to load the box against the Steelers. But when you have the Steelers and you bring in a guy like DK Metcalf, regardless who's the quarterback, you've got Pickens, you bring in a Robert Woods, you've got a Calvin Austin, a Roman Wilson, you've got a Pat Freiermuth, for example. It's going to be harder to stack that box. And when you've got a bloke like Caleb Johnson, whose natural tendency and style, as we've all heard, is very similar to Lad Bell, and he likes to wait for the play to develop, wants to wait for the hold to develop, that's going to be really impactful because he's going to be able to make some really key yardage. And you saw that last year in college, he averaged 6 yards per carry overall. Now, obviously, there's the longer runs and there's the shorter runs, but averaging 6 yards per carry is incredible. Najee Harris never averaged that when he played at Alabama. The other thing I like about it, and God help me, hopefully, the Steelers do it. I would love to see a 2 running back set a lot more often. I talked about that last year in mixing and matching between Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. But Caleb Johnson is a lot faster than Najee Harris, a lot less predictable in the league. People know what Najee Harris does. I would love to see sets where they're both in there together. I think that could be incredibly beneficial for the Steelers. So that is why Caleb Johnson is my favorite pick from this year's NFL draft class. But how about my least favorite pick? Well, I've probably given a few things away in the when I talked about it up front. Probably given away that I like Wire Black. I like Jack Sawyer. I like Derek Harmon. I really like the Will Howard pick. So when you come to the draft picks, there can only be 2 blokes. And I'm probably going to go with the one where most people are kind of a bit out there, what the heck on. And it's actually not going to be like Bruner. I like the Bruner pick. People talk about whether he's his size. I like that he's near the ball. A linebacker's got to be near the ball. He's actually very Chad Moomer-like, who I really liked 2 years ago, coming out of I'm going to blank now on Muma. Wasn't Montana. Anyway, I really liked when he came out. Super rangy guy. Can move crossfield really, really quickly. But it's going to be Dante Kent. Now, I said least favorite. It's not that I did not like the pick. I like you got to get a punt returner later in the UDFAs. They need a backup at cornerback. He did both. He's a very experienced guy. He can play inside and out. But in terms of when I was looking at it and overall with this draft class, and also that they didn't draft a wide receiver at all, and a guy like a Nick Nash was on the board, for example, who I had quite a decent grade on, I didn't. And there's other players that went undrafted that I kind of thought were a better fit with a better pedigree and resume, then great. I'm not discounting that this guy could be really good for the Steelers. I'm not discounting that if he can provide value in the punt and kick return game, that is very important for the Steelers. We've struggled with that part of it. That being said, there's only 1 year on the board for him with Dante Kent. So that's my least favorite pick. I hate saying that. I hate using that sort of terminology. It's why I don't call it a hated pick or anything like it. I think he's going to be helpful for the Steelers. However, he is going to need to prove himself as a DB or as a cornerback as well. Just relying on being a punt returner, kick returning on the roster is not going to cut it. There's other guys that can do that job, particularly like a Calvin Austin. So for me, I think out of all these blokes, Bruner and Kent, but particularly Kent, needs to have a really big preseason. He needs to show up from the get-go. He needs to really make it worth it. But I think he can do that. I think he's a really experienced guy. I think he knows what that looks like. I think the leadership he showed when I looked at some things out of Central Michigan, it's pretty huge from him as well. So, just say, least favorite, not hated. But you let me know in the comments. I know you've probably let other people know in lots of different shows. It's probably taking me a couple more days before than I wanted to get this show out there. Do you agree? Is Caleb Johnson your favorite? Was it Jack Sawyer? Was it Will Howard? Was it Derek Harmon? You let me know in the comments who your favorite and who your least favorites. And if you hate one of the picks, let me know that too. Why not? Let's go for it. Anyway, I'm Matty P. As always, go Steelers.